Hi, second graders. Miss Shannon here. We are working on our narrative writing unit, getting so close to finishing our first rough draft. Today for lesson 6, we will reread to check that your writing makes sense. Very important. So far during this writing unit, we have generated our meaningful moments in our heart map. We have learned to stretch out those small moments by zooming in and including lots of detail in our story. And in our last session, we really focused on crafting powerful endings that would leave the reader feeling either a strong emotion, asking them a question, or including dialogue. So this is a reminder of my example that I had finished my story with the words "the end" without really wrapping up my story. So last time we learned that you could end a story with a strong feeling, asking a question, or including dialogue. I chose to include dialogue and changed my ending to sound like this. The water surrounded the castle. "We did it!" I shouted. Dave gave me a high five. "This is a great sandcastle," he said. So I know all of you worked hard on creating that really powerful ending. And now we are going to reread to make sure your writing makes sense and sounds right. A lot of times when we're working on rough drafts, we're so quick to write our ideas down that we might forget a word or forget a letter as we're spelling. And so our job today is to really focus in and reread what we have written so far to check for any mistakes or things that we could change and improve on. Here is the first thing we are going to check for. We are going to check for proper capitalization. Remember that at the start of every sentence, there should be a capital letter. Okay? So I want you to reread your writing and check that every sentence starts with a capital letter. Okay. Now, there are other times that you might use a capital letter. For example, the word I. When the letter or word I stands by itself, it is always a capital I. In your story, you also may have included people's names, like a family member's name or a pet's name. People's names are also capitalized. So make sure if you are including someone's name in your story that you have capitalized the first letter of their name. A few other words that deserve capital letters to start are holidays, months of the year, days of the week, and names of specific places, proper nouns. We had a lesson on proper nouns a few weeks ago, second graders. So remember that a proper noun is a specific person, place, or thing. You can see there are examples on this slide of when to use capital letters. So in your story, if you use the word I by itself, have people's names in your story, or a holiday or a day of the week, please double check that those are also capitalized. Next, you will check for proper punctuation. Punctuation should end every sentence. You are choosing to either end each sentence with a period, an exclamation point, or a question mark. Now, second graders, we have had 2 lessons this year on punctuation, practicing sentences that end in periods, exclamation points, and question marks. Let's review one more time when we would use each of those end punctuations. We use a period when we are telling a story, speaking in our regular voice. We use an exclamation point to end a sentence when we are excited or yelling, showing strong emotion. We end a sentence in a question mark when we are asking a question. So be sure that each of your sentences, remember a sentence tells a complete thought and has a subject and a predicate or a verb. We've also practiced that together, second graders. Every complete sentence needs to end in punctuation, a period, exclamation point, or question mark. Next, we had a whole lesson on including dialogue, making sure our characters are speaking in our stories. So we need to double check that we are correctly using quotation marks. We set the words apart from the rest of the sentence using quotation marks. You use a quotation mark to begin when the person is speaking and a quotation mark at the end to show when they stopped speaking. You can see that I highlighted mine in yellow. It is also important to always tag your dialogue by telling who said the words. So for example, mine says, "Hello," Miss Shannon shouted. That is called a dialogue tag. I have said who was speaking. So be sure to reread through your writing and double check that you correctly used quotation marks to show when someone was speaking. Lastly, you are going to check for spelling. Now, second graders, I don't expect that every single word in your story is spelled exactly correct, but I do expect and hope that you will be using the knowledge of phonics spelling patterns that we have been practicing this year to check your spelling. All right, so that means thinking about vowel combinations or the different sounds we've been practicing, like or or are. Thinking about those sound spelling cards that we have been practicing during our phonics lessons and applying those when you are spelling out your words. Again, I do not expect that every word is spelled correctly in your story, but I do expect that you are trying your best to sound out your words and apply the spelling patterns we have been practicing to the words. Okay? I'm going to show you a quick example of how I might go over and reread to check for capitalization, punctuation, correct use of quotation marks, and spelling. I'm just going to give you a short snippet right now, since you've already read this story with me before. This is an example of my draft and where I added in my dialogue. You might have remembered this from a previous lesson. What I'm going to do is I am going to use a pink circle to highlight and double check that everything is capitalized that should be. Now, you might do this with a pencil. You could just underline or trace over the letter in pencil to remind yourself that you have checked for capital letters or punctuation. For me, and in order for you all to see my thinking, I have used bright pink circles. So I've gone through, I see that I used my brother's name. That is a proper noun, it is a person. So I double checked that I used a capital D for the name Dave, and I did. I also found that I had the word I by itself, and I remembered that whenever the word I is by itself, it is always capitalized. So I did that as well. And then, of course, made sure that the beginning of every sentence began with a capital letter. Okay, so I read through my draft one time, just looking for capitalization. I'm going to reread it again the next time, thinking about punctuation. Did I end each complete thought with either a period, an exclamation point, or a question mark? Something that goes along with that, second graders, is making sure that your entire page isn't all one sentence, right? You should be separating your thoughts into separate sentences, okay? So today is all about rereading and double checking. This will be the last time we are making edits to our draft. As our next session, we will be turning this into a final copy. Don't do it yet, though, second graders. I want you to wait until you hear my lesson next week. So, your job, of course, reread your writing. Make sure that you have checked all 4 things in your writing: capital letters, punctuation, spelling, and correctly using quotation marks. You can also double check that you haven't missed a word, or if you need to insert a word or add to. This is really your time to fine-tune your writing and make it the best it can be. I would love to see your work that you have been doing today. I would like you to take a picture of just one of the edits you made and share it with me. It can also be like my example where I circled or highlighted where my correct capitalization was. Anything to show me that you have been actively working on your writing today. And you can upload a snapshot of one of your pages. We're getting close to our final draft. I'm so proud of you for working hard every week on this story. Thank you so much for listening, second graders. Go get to work.